By 11:47 p.m., the sleet had turned the alley behind Il Vetro into a narrow channel of silver rain and hard wind, and Rose Diaz could feel every hour of her 16-hour shift in the tendons of her ankles. Her black service flats were soaked through at the seams. The skin at the base of her neck prickled from dried steam and cold drafts. When she pressed her thumb against the inside of her palm, she could still feel the shallow groove from the tray she had balanced through dinner service while pretending her back did not ache. The restaurant's rear door opened, closed, opened again in bursts of kitchen heat and garlic and white wine reduction. But each time it shut, the rain took over, sharp and needling, and she stood in it anyway because the air inside felt too expensive for what waited on her phone. Her banking app showed the same number it had shown an hour earlier, $38 after rent cleared. $38 for bus fare, groceries, school forms she had not signed yet, and the electric bill that had already moved from reminder to final notice. Her landlord had called 3 times in 40 minutes, and each call sat on her lock screen with the same red icon and the same clipped voicemail transcription asking when she planned to discuss ongoing lease concerns. She had muted the phone, then muted it again after the vibration found a way through her apron pocket. Denial had become logistical. If she listened, she would lose 2 minutes in the walk-in freezer pretending to breathe. If she lost 2 minutes, she would get marked slow. If she got marked slow, Nico would shave her weekend hours. Survival, in Rose's life, was arithmetic before it was emotion. Inside, Il Vetro glittered like a place where consequences belonged to other people. Marble floors reflected chandelier light in fractured patterns. The bar backlit imported bottles in amber rows that looked warmer than they were. Men in tailored dark suits leaned over crystal stems and ordered vintages that cost more than Rose's monthly rent, as if price were a decorative detail, one more adjective for the evening. She moved between tables with a fixed, careful rhythm, refilling water, clearing porcelain, sliding check presenters into leather folders with both hands. Smile, nod. Yes, sir. Right away. Of course. Her body cataloged pain in triads: left heel, lower spine, wrists. Her mind cataloged risk in triads, too. Keys, phone, receipts. Nico Armand ran the floor with polished precision and a permanent half-smile, and no one who watched him from the dining room ever saw what Rose saw from 3 feet away. They saw a manager in a charcoal suit who remembered anniversaries and wine notes. From her position, Rose caught the jaw tightening when she paused to stretch her fingers. After everyone clocked in, he adjusted the schedule board, shaving shifts from people who asked for breaks and adding doubles to people who stayed quiet. In the back office, he rested one hand on the tip safe like a man touching a promise. Twice this week, he had asked her to count the cash drawer alone after close, and then had stood in the doorway with his arms folded, watching her write each figure, correcting totals she knew were accurate. He never raised his voice. He never needed to. At 8:10 p.m., while the first wave of reservations arrived under umbrellas, the valets snapped open in practiced arcs. Rose had caught sight of one of those valets at the service entrance. The boy could not have been more than 20. Hair plastered to his forehead, collar dark with rain, hands shaking as he held out a ticket stack. Nico had spoken to him in that same mild tone used for guests, one hand on the doorframe, smile untouched. The valet nodded too quickly afterward, then dropped 2 claim slips before he ran back to the awning. Rose had bent to pick them up, and when she straightened, Nico was already looking at her. "Focus on table 12, he had said, voice smooth as polished stone. "You're moving slowly tonight." She had said, "Yes, Mr. Armand," because her rent depended on the shape of that sentence. By the second week of October, Rose had learned which nights ended with leftovers in which nights ended with nothing but coffee grounds in a paper cup. Tonight had been a leftovers night, but only because one private room canceled 10 minutes before plating, and the kitchen manager had sworn under his breath while wrapping portions for staff. Rose waited until the line cooks turned to clean up before she collected one unopened container of pasta and another with roasted vegetables, then slipped both into the insulated tote she kept behind stacked soda crates. She did not take extra bread. She did not ask for dessert cups the pastry station sometimes offered at close. Hunger had taught her exactly where generosity ended and suspicion began. At 10:52 p.m., while she reset a six-top near the windows, she heard a paper rustle and turned to see a folded roll of bills slide from a guest's jacket when he stood to greet someone at the bar. It landed near the chair leg beside her shoe. The man did not notice. Neither did his companions, busy comparing watches and laughing over a deal she had no context for. Rose bent, picked up the money, and held it in plain sight between two fingers. "Sir," she said. He looked down, startled, then relieved, taking it back with a distracted "thanks." He offered no tip for honesty, no second look, only a nod before returning to conversation. Rose returned to polishing cutlery because the script for women like her never included applause. From the mezzanine level, where private dining offices overlooked the main room through smoked glass and dark railings, Enzo Bellini watched service the way some men watch storms. Rose had seen him only in fragments since she started at Il Vetro 2 months ago. A tailored black coat moving past the host stand, a profile reflected in the wine wall, stillness in a room that made other men straighten. He spoke little on the floor. People moved when he lifted a hand. Tonight, just after she returned the cash roll, Rose looked up to check table pacing and found him already looking down at her. His expression gave nothing away. Not approval, not censure, only attention so focused it felt like being measured. She lowered her gaze first and carried a tray of espresso cups to table 9. Near midnight, when the final checks closed and silverware trays clattered into back sinks, Rose signed out with shoulders that had gone from aching to numb. Nico stood at the office door reviewing totals on a tablet, his cufflinks bright under fluorescent light, his voice polite as he dismissed staff one by one. "Good work tonight. Clock out cleanly. See you tomorrow." When Rose stepped forward, he scanned her line, then glanced at the tote by her feet. "You'll be back at noon," he said without looking at her face. "Do not be late." She said, "Understood." He tapped something on his screen. "And Diaz? Count your own table errors. 2 this evening." She had made no errors. She knew it. He knew it. The note would stay in the system anyway. She pushed through the rear door into sleet and crossed to the service alcove where delivery crates sat beneath a corrugated awning. Warm air leaked from a vent overhead, enough to turn the rain there into a softer mist. Matteo and Lucia waited on the upturned crate she had lined with flattened cardboard and an old fleece, shoulders tucked close beneath oversized coats that had belonged to cousins before them. Matteo looked up first, trying for brave in the way 10-year-olds did when they understood too much. Lucia, 7 and solemn when tired, held a paperback against her chest as if reading could keep cold from reaching her fingers. Rose knelt in front of them, knees stinging on wet concrete, and opened the tote. "I brought dinner," she said quietly. "Still warm." Lucia's eyes lit, and Matteo exhaled in one long breath he'd been holding for an hour. "You ate?" he asked. Rose lied with practiced ease. "I had staff meal before close." Matteo studied her face, skeptical and protective in a way that made her chest tighten, then chose not to challenge her in front of Lucia. "Ms. Morrow locked the side door at 11, he said, practical, reporting conditions the way he might report weather. "So we waited here where the vent is." Rose brushed wet hair off his forehead and checked his hands. Cold, but steady. She checked Lucia's too, then wrapped napkins around plastic forks and split the food exactly in half. She kept none for herself. Their shoulders relaxed as they ate, and the alley, for 3 careful minutes, held only the sounds of rain ticking on metal and 2 children chewing. From the lit window above the service corridor, a shadow moved behind smoked glass and stopped. Rose did not look up again, but she felt the weight of being seen, not as staff number 47 on a payroll sheet, not as the woman who covered doubles and apologized first, but as someone making a choice with witnesses she had not invited. She zipped the empty containers, wiped Lucia's hands with a paper napkin, and checked the time for the last bus. Rent was overdue. Her phone still carried missed calls. Tomorrow's shift was already loaded with penalties she had not earned. None of that changed in the rain behind Il Vetro. She rose, took one child's hand in each of hers, and led them toward the streetlights, with her stomach hollow and her spine still straight. A taxi hissed past the curb and sprayed gray water over Rose's ankles as she guided Matteo and Lucia toward the bus shelter across from the restaurant's side entrance. Their small hands cold in hers, their shoulders tucked in tight as if they could fold away from the weather. Light from Il Vetro spilled onto the wet pavement in golden rectangles, and every time the revolving front door turned, laughter and violin music leaked out, polished and distant, like a party happening in another city. Lucia stumbled on a broken curb edge, and Rose tightened her grip, steadying her without breaking stride. "Bus comes in 6 minutes," Matteo said, peering at the digital sign through sleet. He had learned to read transit boards faster than most adults, scanning for route numbers while pretending it was a game. "If it's on time." "It'll be close enough," Rose answered. Her voice came out softer than she felt. Her stomach had started to cramp from emptiness, a sharp fold under her ribs, but she kept her face even. "When we get in, you both sit by the heater." Lucia looked up at the restaurant windows. "Are those real diamonds?" she whispered, watching a woman in a silver gown tilt her hand beneath the chandelier light. "Probably," Matteo said, with the dry certainty of an older brother who had already made his peace with unfairness. Rose followed Lucia's gaze and saw reflections layered over reflections. Crystal pendants, velvet drapes, men in midnight suits who wore silence like armor. Then she saw herself in the glass, blurred by rain and distance, black uniform wrinkled at the waist, hair frizzed from steam and sleet, coat zipper stuck halfway. She almost laughed at the contrast. Not because it was funny, but because it was so precise. The restaurant's floral display for one private table would have covered her electric bill for 2 months. Her phone buzzed inside her pocket again. Unknown number. Then, immediately, another call from her landlord. She declined both and shoved the device deeper into the fabric lining. The service door behind them banged open hard enough to make Lucia flinch. Nico stepped out under the narrow awning, dry and immaculate in his charcoal suit, his tie perfectly centered, his expression arranged into managerial concern. He did not look at Rose first. He looked at the children, then at the bus sign, then finally at her, and the slight smile on his mouth never reached his eyes. "Miss Diaz," he said, the title formal, the tone not. "I need you back inside for a discrepancy report." Rose kept her body between him and the kids. "I clocked out." "You did." He glanced at his watch. "And now you are being called back under protocol. Table 15 disputed a gratuity entry. You processed that check." "It was signed. I handed it to accounting." "Then this will be quick." Nico's gaze dropped to Lucia's soaked sleeve and came up again. "Unless you prefer payroll to note refusal to cooperate." Mateo's fingers tightened around Rose's hand. Lucia pressed against Rose's hip, eyes tracking Nico's cufflinks instead of his face. Rose felt the old pressure settle over her chest, the one that made options narrow to one painful line: rent, hours, food. She could hear the bus rumbling somewhere around the next block, the brakes whining in the wet. "Take them with you," she said. "I'm not leaving them outside." Nico made a small show of hesitation, as if he were being asked for a favor beyond reason. Employees' family members are not permitted in staff zones after close. They're children in freezing rain. His smile sharpened by a fraction. "Then make this efficient." By the time they crossed back through the service entrance, the wall clock above dry storage read 12:08 a.m., and the kitchen had slipped into the brittle silence that followed cleanup. Stainless counters gleamed under fluorescent lights. The smell of bleach sat on top of roasted garlic and burnt sugar. A dishwasher paused mid-stack as Rose passed with the children, his eyes flicking from Lucia's wet shoes to Nico's face and back down again. No one said anything. Nico led them through a narrow corridor lined with framed black and white photos of Il Vetro's opening night. Old men in tuxedos raising glasses, women in satin laughing with perfect teeth. Lucia stared at the pictures, then at her own hand wrapped around Rose's thumb, and lowered her head. At the edge of the main dining room, Nico stopped. The late seating had thinned, but a handful of VIP tables still glowed under shaded lamps, white linen untouched by the weather outside. A hostess in a fitted black dress looked up, froze for 1 second at the sight of the children, then smoothed her expression and looked away. A server carrying champagne flutes adjusted his path to avoid them, as if proximity itself might stain something. Nico lowered his voice. "Stand there. Do not move." He pointed to a service alcove beside the wine wall, half hidden by a bronze sculpture and a tall arrangement of orchids. Rose swallowed back the first response that rose in her throat. "I said I'm not leaving them." "You are not leaving. You are 5 steps away." His eyes held hers with deliberate patience. "Unless you want this discussion in front of guests." Lucia whispered, "I'm cold." Rose crouched and unzipped her own coat, wrapping it around both children's shoulders, tugging the sleeves around them like blankets. Mateo immediately pulled one side over Lucia first, then leaned against the wall as if he were older than 10 and this were routine. Rose brushed water from his temple and stood. Nico handed her a tablet. "Sign acknowledgement. Report pending. I'll attach details." The screen showed a generic form with legal language dense enough to hide anything. No itemized amount, no attached check image, a blank field labeled Employee Statement. Her pulse ticked hard at her throat. "I'm not signing a blank report." "Then write your statement and submit it now. I need the record in full." His jaw shifted. "You are in no position to make demands." A woman at the nearest table glanced over, irritation crossing her face, not at Nico, not at the disruption, but at Rose. Her gaze paused on Mateo's shoes, then moved away with practiced dismissal. Rose felt heat rise up her neck despite the cold still trapped in her clothes. Nico stepped closer, voice smooth and low. "You've already had notes added to your performance file tonight. Slow service, incorrect pacing. If this escalates, I can recommend suspension pending investigation. Do you understand me?" Rose looked at him, then at the tablet, then at her siblings huddled in her coat beneath imported orchids worth more than her monthly groceries. Shame and anger tangled until she could barely separate one from the other. She took the stylus, wrote in the statement field that she disputed the report due to missing documentation, and signed only that line. Nico watched her handwriting like he was counting the strokes. "Thank you," he said. "Now go home. And next time, use judgment about where you leave minors." The words landed like a slap delivered with a smile. Rose's throat closed so hard she had to breathe through her nose to stay steady. Mateo lifted his chin, eyes narrowed on Nico with a look too old for his face. Rose folded the tablet cover shut and handed it back. "Come on," she said to the children, each syllable controlled. As they turned toward the corridor, Enzo Bellini stepped from the mezzanine stairs to the edge of the dining room, one hand resting on the dark railing. He wore a black suit without a tie, collar open, his expression unreadable and exact. The room around him seemed to recalibrate by instinct. Servers straightened, conversations dipped and resumed in softer tones. His gaze moved once over Rose, then to the children wrapped in her coat, then to Nico holding the signed tablet. He said nothing. Nico offered a crisp nod in his direction, a man presenting efficiency. Rose did not wait for permission or explanation. She walked her siblings back through the corridor and out into the weather, pulse still hammering at the base of her neck. The sleet had thickened to hard rain by the time they reached the bus shelter again, the wind needling through the slats and lifting wet hair from Rose's temples. The bus sign now flashed, delay. 14 minutes. Lucia's lower lip trembled once, before she bit it flat. Mateo checked the street with stubborn concentration, as if attention alone could summon headlights. "We can walk 2 stops and catch it there," Rose said. "Stay close. No running." They made it half a block before someone called her name from behind the loading zone fence. "Rose, wait." It was the valet from earlier, the young one with rain-plastered hair and shaking hands. Up close, she saw how pale he was beneath the neon spill from the parking sign, and how his fingers kept opening and closing around a ring of keys. His blazer was too thin for the weather and hung unevenly like he had put it on in a hurry. "I'm not supposed to talk to staff off shift," he said quickly, glancing toward the service door. There's something you should know." Rose shifted so Mateo and Lucia stayed behind her. "About what?" He swallowed. "About tonight. About what Mr. Armand's doing with the closeout numbers." Her body went very still. "Who are you?" "Dylan." He rubbed a hand over his mouth. "I park for Bellini nights and weekend overflow. I bring claim slips to office when asked." Rain-tapped metal, gutters, glass, each sound too sharp. The street felt suddenly narrow, every passing set of tires too loud. Dylan looked over his shoulder again. "He had me rerun tickets last week. Said the system glitched, told me to write duplicate stubs by hand for 2 cash pickups after midnight. Same table numbers, different totals." He shook his head. "I thought it was accounting cleanup. Then I saw him move bills from one envelope to another and mark your employee code on the clip." Rose stared at him, hearing her own heartbeat over the traffic. "Why tell me now?" "Because he asked who saw you by the tip safe. He asked twice." Dylan's voice dropped. "And because he told me if anyone asked. I never saw kids near the service entrance." He was smiling when he said it. Lucia shifted behind Rose, tired and shivering. Mateo's hand found Rose's sleeve and gripped it. "Do you have anything in writing?" Rose asked. Dylan nodded once, jerky. "I took pictures of the duplicate stubs. Not to help you, not at first. To cover myself. They're on my phone." A dark sedan rolled out from the underground ramp and idled at the curb, windows blacked out. Dylan stiffened and stepped back into shadow, as if trained by fear. "Don't open messages from unknown numbers tonight," he said, words rushing now. "And if he asks you to come in early tomorrow, don't go alone." The service door opened across the alley. Warm light spilled out in a hard rectangle. 2 sets of footsteps hit wet concrete, measured and unhurried. Dylan flinched, shoved his hands in his pockets, and walked fast toward the valet stand without another word. Rose didn't move. Rain ran down the back of her neck under her collar. The children pressed close on either side of her, and from across the loading lane, she watched the shadows lengthen from the doorway, while Nico's polished voice carried through the weather, calm enough to pass for courtesy. Nico's polished voice carried through the weather with the same measured cadence he used for anniversary tables and complaint refunds. "Miss Diaz, come back inside. Now." Rose did not move at first. Rain slid down her collar and under her uniform, cold enough to make her shoulders shake, and she kept both children behind her legs while she watched him cross the loading lane with another supervisor at his side. The supervisor, Lena from late bar service, looked as if she wanted to be anywhere else. Clipboard clutched against her chest, eyes fixed on the pavement. "I already clocked out," Rose said. Nico stopped an arm's length away, close enough for her to smell clean cologne over wet concrete. "There is an immediate integrity issue, a cash discrepancy. You were the last staff member assigned to that section." He angled his body so his words carried toward the service door where 2 line cooks were smoking under the awning. "I am requiring a bag check and statement under policy." Mateo shifted closer to her hip. Lucia's fingers twisted in the edge of Rose's sleeve. "Not out here," Rose said quietly. "Not with them in the rain." Nico glanced at the children, then gave a small, sympathetic tilt of his head that looked almost kind from 10 feet away. "Then don't make this difficult. Bring them in. We'll do this professionally." He turned without waiting for consent. Rose stood 1 beat longer, heart hammering in short, hard bursts, then followed because refusing in front of witnesses would become another line in another report she would never be allowed to read in full. Behind her, Dylan kept his face down at the valet stand and pretended he had never spoken to her. At 12:17 a.m., the private dining corridor looked like a hotel advertisement. Warm sconces, polished brass, orchid arrangements so fresh they still held droplets from misting. Rose's soaked flats squeaked on marble with every step. Nico guided them past the staff hall and into the edge of the main room where a handful of late guests still lingered over cognac. The violinist had packed up, but soft recorded music still floated from ceiling speakers, and each note sharpened the humiliation of what came next. Nico lifted a hand, calm and public-facing. "Apologies for the interruption. Minor staff audit. We'll be brief." Every nearby head turned. Crystal caught light. A woman in emerald silk paused with her glass halfway to her mouth. A man at the bar checked Rose once from wet hair to worn cuffs, then looked away with the bored disinterest rich men saved for service problems. Rose felt her throat tighten. "Do this in the office?" "We are," Nico said, still smiling. "After preliminary verification." He extended his palm. "Your tote." She kept hold of the strap. "My siblings are cold." "Lena," Nico said without taking his eyes off Rose, "take the children to staff break for cocoa." Lucia looked up, uncertain. Mateo's jaw set, protective and rigid. Rose crouched and touched both their shoulders. "Go with her for 5 minutes," she whispered. "Stay together. Don't open any doors unless I'm there." Mateo searched her face and gave one tight nod. Lena led them down the hall, moving quickly, and Rose waited until Lucia's coat disappeared around the corner before she handed Nico the tote. He opened it, removed the empty containers from dinner, shook out napkins, checked the side pocket with slow theatrical care, then held the bag up for 2 bussers and a hostess to see. "No cash in tote?" he said evenly, as if documenting facts. Heat rose behind Rose's eyes. "Because I didn't take any." "Then you won't object to checking your apron?" I already signed a dispute. That was for gratuity variance. This is theft. The word landed in the room like a dropped plate. The couple at the nearest table went still. Rose saw the hostess's mouth part and close again. Nico stepped in, fingers pinching the fabric at Rose's waist as if adjusting uniform lines. She jerked back instinctively, but he was faster and pulled a folded roll of bills from the inner seam of her apron pocket, lifting it between two fingers in plain view. "Found," he said. Sound thinned around her. Rose stared at the cash and then at him, and for a second all she could hear was rain striking the windows beyond the bar, steady and relentless. "That isn't mine," she said. Her voice came out rough. "You planted that." Nico's expression shifted to weary disappointment, the look of a manager dealing with a difficult employee. "Careful. I never put cash there. I haven't touched." "Rose." He cut in softly, using her first name now as if he were helping her. "Lower your voice." She realized she had already raised it when a waiter 2 stations over flinched and pretended to polish glass. Her skin prickled with cold and rage. In the mirror behind the bar, she could see her own face, pale, rain-damp, exhausted, and the roll of bills in Nico's dry hand, as clear as a verdict. "Office," Nico said. "Now." He started toward the service corridor, guiding her with a flat hand at her elbow. The pressure looked polite from the dining room. It bruised like a clamp. Rose walked because if she fought him here, he would call it instability, and he had just shown how easy it was for him to turn performance into proof. They reached the corridor near the wine cellar stairs, quiet and bright and nearly empty. Nico dropped the smile the moment they were out of guest sight. His grip tightened. "You will write that you took the envelope by mistake under fatigue," he said, voice low and smooth. "You will sign immediate termination. You will not mention me to payroll, security, or anyone else." Rose pulled her arm once. He did not let go. "I'm not signing a lie." His eyes went flat. "Then I report a pattern. Missing cash tonight. Prior attitude notes, children left in commercial zones after midnight." He leaned closer. "I already have a draft statement ready for family services review in case you decide to be dramatic." Her stomach dropped so hard she felt dizzy. "You wouldn't." "I plan for outcomes." He nodded toward the cellar door at the end of the hall. "Inside. We finish this where there are no spectators." The cellar was used for inventory checks. Narrow aisles, no windows. 1 camera at the outer entrance only. Rose knew every blind corner in that room. Fear surged up her spine in one cold wave and nearly locked her knees. Then Dylan's words snapped back into place. "Duplicate stubs. Your employee code on the clip." Nico released her long enough to key open the cellar door. In that small opening, Rose shifted 1 step to the wall-mounted order tablet outside the private room station, the same model she had used at pre-shift. Her hands shook, but she moved fast, touching her employee icon and entering the access sequence she had buried beneath the surface menu after afternoon prep. She had built it in 12 stolen minutes while polishing cutlery. Cash log photos, schedule edits, 2 screenshots of Nico reassigning late close witnesses, all queued to auto-send to security oversight if her code was frozen or flagged for disciplinary lock. Nico saw the screen light and lunged. "What are you doing?" "Submitting my statement," she said, eyes on the tablet. His hand hit the side of the device, canceling her input. He grabbed the stylus and tossed it down the hall. Then he tapped into manager controls with brutal efficiency and revoked her user credentials on the spot. "Access denied," flashed in red. So did the tiny confirmation line she had programmed beneath it. "Dispute packet sent." Nico did not notice it. Rose did. A tremor ran through her so hard she had to brace a palm against the wall. She had done it. The files were gone from the local queue and no longer hers alone. Power tilted by a fraction, silent and irreversible. Nico caught her wrist and pulled her toward the cellar threshold anyway. "You do not get to improvise with me." Rose dug her heels into marble. "Take your hand off me." He leaned in, jaw tight, smile gone, voice barely above breath. "You always did confuse defiance with leverage." Footsteps sounded at the far end of the corridor, measured, unhurried, more than one set. Nico did not turn. He dragged her another half step and reached for the cellar handle. "Mr. Armand." The voice came from behind him, low baritone, smooth and devoid of warmth. Nico stopped. Enzo Bellini stood at the corridor entrance in a black suit. No overcoat now, dark hair still dry from the private level above. 2 security men flanked him with earpieces and tablets in hand. Behind them, the security chief, Vittoria Klein, held her phone out with Rose's files open on screen, rows of timestamps reflected in her glasses. The hallway went silent, except for rain against distant glass and the buzz of fluorescent lights. Enzo's gaze took in Nico's hand on Rose's wrist, the open cellar door, the roll of bills still in Nico's pocket, and then settled on Rose's face. "Step away from her," he said. Nico released Rose at once. "Mr. Bellini, this is a personnel matter. I was containing—" "Lock the service exits," Enzo said to security without looking away from Nico. "No one leaves this building without my clearance." Both guards moved immediately. Enzo continued, clipped and precise. "Bring her children upstairs to the penthouse kitchen. Dry clothes. Food. Have Dr. Conti assess for cold exposure and document condition." His eyes shifted to Vittoria. "Preserve all camera feeds from 7:30 p.m. to current, including blind angle stitch from corridor and tip office. Pull POS edits, manager overrides, and valet ticket revisions." Vittoria nodded once. "Already in process." Nico raised his hand slightly, controlled, diplomatic. "Sir, you're acting on an unverified upload from a distressed employee. She was just found with—" Enzo stepped forward one pace. His voice stayed calm, but there was controlled rage under every word. "You will speak when asked. Do you understand me?" Nico swallowed. "Yes, sir." Rose realized she was still shaking and curled her fingers into her palms to hide it. The skin beneath Nico's grip throbbed. Her breathing came unevenly, thin at the top of her chest. Enzo turned to her then, and when he spoke again, his tone dropped, still formal but gentler. "Ms. Diaz, are you injured?" She opened her mouth and nothing came out. She forced air in, tried again. "My wrist, I'm fine." "You are not fine," Enzo said. "You are safe. Stay behind me." The words struck somewhere deep and raw. Safe had become a word she budgeted like rent, theoretical, often deferred. Hearing it in this corridor, with witnesses and locked exits and evidence already moving, made her knees feel unsteady. Lena reappeared at the corridor bend with Matteo and Lucia, bundled in dry staff jackets, 2 sizes too big. Cups of cocoa in their hands, faces flushed from heat. Lucia spotted Rose and started toward her, but halted when she saw the men and the tension in the hall. "It's okay," Rose said quickly, voice breaking on the second syllable. Enzo crouched to Lucia's eye level without touching her. "My name is Enzo. You and your brother are going upstairs where it's warm. Your sister will join you in a few minutes." He looked to Matteo. "You stay together. You tell Vittoria if you need anything. Anything." Matteo studied him, wary and fierce, then nodded once. Vittoria guided the children toward the private elevator with Lena beside them. Rose watched until the doors closed, shoulders still rigid, then faced the corridor again. Enzo straightened and addressed Nico without raising his voice. From this moment, you are suspended from all floor authority. Surrender your access cards, office keys, and phone. Nico's composure cracked at the edges. Mr. Bellini, with respect, this is disproportionate. No. Enzo held out his hand. This is protocol. Nico hesitated too long. One security guard stepped in. Nico handed over his keyring, then his phone, each movement clipped with anger. Enzo turned to the guard. Escort Mr. Armand to conference room C. He is not to speak to staff. He is not to delete, call, or message anyone. Then, to Rose, with the same measured certainty, medical office? Now. She nodded because her body had reached the edge of what it could hold upright. As she passed him, Enzo shifted slightly to block Nico's line of sight to her, a small movement with absolute intent. Behind her, Nico finally lost the polished tone. This is a misunderstanding, he said, voice tight. You're making a mistake for a waitress. Enzo did not look back. No, he said, eyes on Rose's unsteady steps toward the lift. I'm correcting one. Rose reached the private elevator with her pulse still thudding in her throat, and Enzo stayed half a step behind her, not touching her, making it clear with his body alone that no one else would come close unless she allowed it. The chrome doors opened without a button press. Vittoria was already inside, one hand braced on the rail, the other moving fast over her phone. Enzo spoke as soon as they stepped in. Medical office secured? Vittoria nodded. Dr. Conti is waiting. Kids are in the penthouse kitchen with Lena and Marta. Dry clothes are on the way. Enzo's gaze shifted to the bruise darkening around Rose's wrist. No one questions the children tonight, he said. No statements from minors. Food first, heat first, sleep if they need it. The elevator hummed upward, smooth and silent, and Rose leaned back against brushed steel because her knees kept threatening to fold. She had spent months learning how to disappear inside a room. Now every protocol in the building was bending around her name. The medical office sat behind frosted glass on the private level. Nothing like the crowded urgent care she used twice last winter, when Lucia caught the flu and Matteo split his chin on black ice. Here there was warm light, matte white cabinets, a leather chair instead of cracked vinyl. A compact woman in navy scrubs met Rose at the door, silver hair pinned in a neat knot, expression direct and steady. I'm Dr. Conti. May I examine your wrist? No assumptions, no reaching without permission. Rose nodded and sat. The leather was warm from a space heater placed nearby. When she held out her arm, a tremor ran from elbow to fingertips so hard she had to clasp her other hand over it. Dr. Conti worked carefully, 2 fingers at a time, pressing around the swelling, checking range of motion, asking before each movement. Pain here? Rose answered through clenched teeth. Yes. The doctor angled the lamp, documenting marks with a clinic tablet, then looked up. Any dizziness, nausea, shortness of breath? Rose opened her mouth to deny all of it out of habit, then stopped. Dizziness, she said, and I haven't eaten since noon. Enzo stood near the far wall, jacket unbuttoned, phone in his hand, his face composed into that hard stillness that made the room feel narrower. He did not interrupt the exam. He did not fill the silence with reassurance. He made calls. Conference room C remains closed, he said into the phone. Mr. Armand is supervised at all times. Pull his manager logins for the past 90 days. A pause. Yes, all mirrored drives. If anything is deleted, I want a forensic snapshot within the minute. He ended that call, made another. Get me payroll counsel and outside financial crimes. Tonight, not morning. His voice stayed low, but each instruction landed like a door locking. Rose had known men who sounded powerful when they threatened someone weaker. This was different. This was structure moving, fast and expensive and deliberate, in her direction instead of against her. Dr. Conti wrapped Rose's wrist in a supportive brace and set pain medication beside a glass of water. No fracture signs, but soft tissue strain and bruising are significant. I'm photographing for record, with your consent. Rose signed on the tablet with her left hand, signature uneven. The doctor glanced at the fading marks higher on her forearm, pale yellow shadows that old makeup had not hidden under restaurant lights. Are these from tonight, too? Rose stared at them and felt heat crawl up her neck. No. Dr. Conti did not push for details. I'll document as prior injuries, patient reported. She stepped back. You need calories and warmth now. Shock can follow stress even without major trauma. Enzo moved to the table, slid a plate of crackers closer, and then retreated again, keeping distance precise enough that Rose could breathe. At 12:31 a.m., the wall clock above the sink clicked forward, and Vittoria came in with a second tablet and a thick folder already labeled Incident Hold. We've preserved corridor feeds and stitched blind angles, she said. POS overrides confirm Mr. Armand used manager credentials to flag Ms. Diaz's code at 12:19. Auto-release packet triggered exactly then. She turned the screen so Rose could see her own photos, time-stamped and intact. Altered cache logs, schedule edits, duplicate closeout lines. The evidence she had built in fear looked colder and stronger in black text and white cells. Rose swallowed hard. The valet, she said. Dylan. He has photos of duplicate stubs. Nico pressured him. Vittoria's eyes sharpened. Last name? Rose shook her head. I don't know. He works overflow, mostly Bellini nights. Enzo answered without hesitation. Find him, quietly. He gets counsel and protection if he cooperates. Vittoria typed once. Already flagged security to intercept at shift end. External contact, no longer a whispered warning in the rain, moved into procedure. When Dr. Conti finally stepped out to prepare an anti-inflammatory injection, the room went still, except for the heater's soft hum. Rose stared at the cup in her hands and realized she was gripping it hard enough to ache. Enzo watched her for a long beat, then spoke with formal restraint. Your siblings are safe upstairs. They are dry. They are eating. The words were simple, almost administrative. But her chest loosened for the first time since Nico pulled the cellar door open. Thank you, she said, and hated how thin her voice sounded. He inclined his head once, as if gratitude made him uncomfortable. You protected evidence while under duress. That altered the outcome. Rose gave a short, disbelieving breath that almost became a laugh. I set that trigger because I thought no one would believe me. Enzo's expression did not soften, but something in his eyes changed, less appraisal, more recognition. You planned 3 moves ahead while exhausted and threatened. People noticed that in this building. Dr. Conti returned, administered the injection, and handed Rose a thermal wrap for her shoulders. 15 minutes before standing, she said. Then you can go see the children. Rose nodded, wrapped herself in heat, and let her eyes close for exactly 3 breaths. She did not sleep. She listened. Footsteps in the corridor. A muted ring from Enzo's phone. His low answers. Yes. Preserve that. No interviews without counsel present. Every line reinforced the same boundary. No improvisation. No private handling. No way for Nico to spin this back into her fault by sunrise. When Rose stood, Enzo moved to the door and waited for her pace instead of setting it. The private hallway opened into the penthouse-level kitchen, a room the size of her entire apartment, all stone counters and copper pans and windows beaded with rain. It smelled like chicken broth, toasted bread, and cinnamon. Matteo sat at the island in borrowed sweatpants, with the cuffs rolled 4 times, hands wrapped around a mug nearly as big as his face. Lucia was perched on a stool beside him in an oversized Bellini staff hoodie. Wet braids replaced by a loose towel turban that made her look small and solemn and suddenly younger than 7. Marta, the house manager, stirred soup on the range and turned as Rose entered. "They ate half an hour ago," she said quietly. "Both asked for you every 3 minutes." Lucia slid off the stool and ran to Rose, stopping just short of impact when she saw the brace on Rose's wrist. "Does it hurt?" she whispered. Rose knelt and kissed her forehead. "Less now." Matteo came slower, chin lifted in that stubborn way he used when he was trying not to show fear. "A man in a suit asked if we were okay," he said, glancing at Enzo. "He didn't touch anything. He asked first." Enzo stepped closer, then crouched to bring himself level with the children. "May I check your knee?" he asked Lucia, eyes on her face, not the scrape. Lucia nodded after a small pause. He examined the shallow abrasion with clinical care, called for antiseptic, and let Marta apply it while he stayed back. No theatrics, no false sweetness, just attention and permission. Rose watched his hands, steady even now, and felt a disorienting mix of relief and grief twist through her. Relief that someone competent was helping. Grief that this competence had always been treated as luxury in her world. Matteo glanced between Rose and Enzo, then asked the question adults had avoided all night. "Are we in trouble?" Rose opened her mouth, but Enzo answered first, tone clear enough for children. "No, you are not in trouble." An adult lied. "We are fixing it." Matteo absorbed that, eyes narrowing with serious concentration. "For real fixing?" Enzo held his gaze. "For real." Matteo gave one short nod, as if signing a contract. Lucia climbed back onto her stool and resumed eating, shoulders slowly unclenching under the borrowed hoodie. Rose sat at the island and wrapped both hands around a bowl Marta placed in front of her. Steam fogged her vision. Hunger hit hard once she took the first spoonful, and she had to force herself to slow down so her stomach would tolerate it. Enzo remained standing across from her, one hand on the back of a chair, waiting until the children were occupied before he spoke. "Vittoria needs a full statement from you when you can manage it. Not tonight if you're fading. But I need one central question answered now." Rose looked up. "What question?" His voice stayed even. "Why did Armand think he could leverage child welfare threats against you?" The room quieted around the words, around the rain tapped the windows. Metal clicked softly as Marta set down a ladle and moved out of earshot without being asked. Rose stared at the surface of her soup for several seconds, watching oil shimmer in fractured circles. "They're not my kids," she said at last, then corrected herself. "They're mine in practice, not on paper yet." She felt Matteo go still beside her. "They're my brother and sister. Same mother. Their fathers were different and gone early. Mom died 14 months ago from sepsis after a delayed ER admission. By then, there was no money left, just debts and a lease in arrears." The words came out clipped, almost procedural, because if she let emotion in, she might not finish. "I filed for guardianship. Hearing kept getting pushed. Nico knew because he used to be listed as emergency contact when we were together. He copied documents from my apartment before I left him." She lifted her braced wrist a fraction. "After I left, He started paying one bill at a time through third parties, so I couldn't trace it cleanly. Then he called it debt and said if I didn't cooperate at work, he'd send concerns to family court. Enzo's grip tightened on the chair back, knuckles whitening once, then easing. Cooperate how? Extra shifts off the books. Cash counts alone. Signing forms I wasn't allowed to read in full. Rose kept her voice low, so Lucia would not hear every word. He never had to hit me where anyone could see. He just had to remind me one bad report could separate us until a judge sorted paperwork. She glanced at Matteo, who stared into his mug with his jaw clenched. I told myself I could absorb it until the hearing was done. Tonight he escalated because he thought I was isolated. She met Enzo's eyes. I wasn't this time. Something moved across his face then, brief and hard, not pity, respect, edged with anger at the system that had made her calculate survival this way. Loyalty under pressure is easy to claim, he said quietly. Harder to prove. You proved it in the alley and in that corridor. He paused, choosing the next words with unusual care. I grew up around men who treated dependence as opportunity. My mother ran numbers for people who thought fear was management. She taught me one rule. If power does not protect the vulnerable first, it is rot. He glanced toward the children, then back to Rose. Armand confused access with immunity. That error ends tonight. Rose looked down at her bowl, suddenly unable to hold his gaze. The statement should have sounded like strategy. Instead, it landed like a handhold in deep water. She took a slow breath, then another, feeling the tremor in her shoulders settle by degrees. Around her, the kitchen continued in small domestic sounds that had been absent from her nights for months. Spoon against ceramic, kettle whispering, Lucia asking Marta for more bread in a voice no longer shaking. Safety did not arrive as a grand feeling. It arrived as logistics done correctly, boundaries enforced in real time, children fed before dawn. Enzo's phone vibrated. He read the message and addressed Rose without looking away from her. Security located Dylan at the valet station. He requested legal counsel and has surrendered his photos voluntarily. Chain of custody started. One more thread anchored. One more witness pulled out of shadow and into record. Rose exhaled, long and unsteady, and for the first time that night believed sunrise might not erase what had happened. Enzo set his phone down on the counter, voice low enough that only she heard him. Eat. Sit with them. When you're ready, we document everything. No one gets to rewrite your story in this building again. Rose held his gaze for a second longer, then looked down at the steam rising from her bowl as if it could steady her breathing. Her fingers still shook around the spoon. Matteo had shifted closer on her right, shoulder touching her sleeve, while Lucia leaned drowsily against Marta's arm and fought sleep between bites of bread. The warmth in the kitchen wrapped around all of them, but the memory of marble floors and Nico's hand at her wrist sat sharp under her skin. Vittoria stepped in again, speaking quietly from the doorway so the children would not startle. Ms. Diaz, the statement room is ready when you are. Audio and video record are set. Counsel for Minors Guardianship is on secure line. She paused, then added, You can decline anything and resume later. Rose nodded and pushed her bowl away with reluctance, hunger at war with adrenaline. I can do it now. Enzo looked at her brace, at the fatigue hollowing the space beneath her eyes, and then at the children. 10 minutes, he said. Sit with them first. His tone was not a request, and still did not feel like control. It felt like structure placed around a fracture so it could heal straight. She did as he said, because he was right. Lucia climbed into her lap, and curled under the thermal wrap, all narrow shoulders and warm breath against Rose's neck. Mateo sat close enough that his knee pressed hers, pretending to read the ingredient list on a cocoa packet while tracking every movement near the door. Rose kissed the crown of Lucia's head, inhaled soap and rain-damp hair, and made herself stay still until her pulse slowed. At 12:54 a.m., when Lucia's eyes finally drifted shut, Marta guided both children toward a guest room prepared on the same floor, promising extra blankets and cartoons at low volume. Mateo resisted for one breath, then looked at Rose's face and accepted the compromise. "You come after?" he asked. "I come after," she said. He gave Enzo a wary glance. No one talks to her alone. Enzo answered without hesitation. Agreed. When the door closed behind them, the kitchen seemed suddenly too large. Rose stood and swayed once. Enzo's hand moved half an inch, then stopped before touching her. "Do you want support walking?" he asked. The careful permission in the question made something complicated tighten in her chest. Nico had always used touch as correction, possession, warning. Enzo treated it like a boundary with legal weight. Rose swallowed and shook her head. "I can walk." The statement room sat off Enzo's private office, glass on one wall and matte oak on the others, with 2 cameras visible and red indicator lights already active. Nothing hidden. A digital clock in the corner marked each second with a soft pulse. Vittoria took the seat across from Rose, while an attorney appeared on a secure tablet screen, introducing herself as Camille Reyes, family court counsel retained by Bellini Holdings for emergency protective filings. Rose almost laughed at the phrase emergency protective filings because those words belonged to people who could pay for them. She had spent 14 months filling forms in public waiting rooms where printers jammed and clerks suggested she come back next week. Vittoria began with protocol. "You can pause, request water, or refuse any question. Do you consent to recording?" "Yes." "State your name for record." "Rose Elena Diaz." As the interview moved through timelines, Rose felt the old reflex rising. Minimize it, smooth it, make it sound manageable so no one got angry. She forced herself to do the opposite. She described the schedule edits, the isolated cash counts, the planted bills, the cellar door. She described the landlord calls and unknown numbers that spiked each time she challenged a write-up. She admitted she had stayed too long because she feared any formal complaint would trigger retaliatory reports to family court. Camille Reyes listened with the focused stillness of someone assembling a case in real time. "Ms. Diaz, I need precision on one point. Did Mr. Armand explicitly connect your cooperation at work to your siblings' placement risk?" Rose's throat tightened. She looked at the tabletop, then made herself look into the camera. "Yes, multiple times." His exact phrase was, "Judges care about stability, and you don't have any." Tonight, he said he had a draft for family services review if I got dramatic. Camille nodded. "That is coercion with custodial interference implications. We can seek immediate restraining relief and emergency guardianship acceleration by morning docket." Morning docket. Another phrase from a world she did not trust yet. She signed the preliminary declaration with her left hand. Her signature came out jagged again. When Vittoria slid over a second tablet with still images from corridor cameras, Rose's stomach rolled. In one frame, Nico's hand gripped her wrist hard enough to whiten his knuckles. In another, his body blocked the only open space between her and the wall. She had lived inside those moments as sensation. Seeing them flattened into evidence made her feel both vindicated and exposed. Enzo remained by the glass, arms folded, saying nothing unless asked. The silence around him was dense, controlled. and Rose could feel his attention on every detail, like pressure against her shoulder blades. Attraction arrived in the middle of that pressure, unwelcome and undeniable. A quick pull in her chest when he stepped closer to adjust the room temperature, because he noticed her shiver before she did. Fear arrived with it, equally strong. Men with this level of power did not enter her life without cost. The collision of those truths made her dizzy. Vittoria finished the initial questions and stood. "I'll cue conference review in 12 minutes. Mr. Bellini, detectives are downstairs." "Bring them to office 3, Enzo said. "No contact with Armand until packet transfer is complete." After she left, Rose remained seated, staring at her bandaged wrist. The quiet between her and Enzo stretched, not awkward, not easy. "You don't have to trust me tonight," he said finally. His voice was low, stripped of public formality. "You only have to trust the process I'm putting in place." She let out a breath that trembled on the way out. "Process can be bought." "Yes," he said. "That is why I build redundancy." He moved to the table and placed a folder beside her without opening it. Inside are copies of every item submitted so far, with independent timestamps, chain of custody IDs, and names of everyone with access. One copy stays with you. One goes to your counsel. One goes to detectives. No single person can bury this. Rose touched the edge of the folder, then pulled her hand back. "Why are you doing this for me?" He held her gaze. "Because you were targeted under my roof. Because evidence supports you. Because your siblings are collateral in a coercion scheme I will not tolerate." A brief pause. "And because I saw you in that alley, choose them over yourself when no one was supposed to be watching." The honesty in it hit harder than flattery would have. Her skin prickled. "That doesn't mean I belong to your system. It means you are protected while you decide your next step," he said. "Not owned." Her heart hammered once, hard enough to hurt. She believed he meant it. She also knew belief was not the same as safety learned over time. "Then I need terms," she said. His expression sharpened with interest, not offense. "State them." "No private meetings without a second person present until I say otherwise. No physical contact unless you ask first. My siblings stay with me tonight. Any job offer in writing, reviewed by counsel with housing support separate from personal expectations." A faint, almost incredulous exhale left him, as if she had surprised him again. "Accepted. Add one more." She frowned. "What?" "If Armand or his proxies attempt contact, you call Vittoria first and me second. No responding directly. Do you agree?" "Yes." "Good." By 1:11 a.m., they walked together to Enzo's glass office for the formal confrontation. Vittoria on Rose's left, and Camille Reyes, now physically present, briefcase in hand and expression set. 2 detectives waited near the far wall with tablets and badge clips visible. Conference room C connected through a transparent partition that could frost at a touch. Tonight, it stayed clear by design. Nico sat at the long end of the table, jacket removed, tie loosened exactly 1 notch, trying to perform dignified inconvenience. A guard stood behind him. When he saw Rose enter, his mouth curved in that familiar half-smile, the one that said he still believed he could narrate her into silence. "Rose," he said, smooth as oil. "Thank God. Tell them this got blown out of proportion." Enzo took position between them before she could answer. "You will address Ms. Diaz as Ms. Diaz," he said. "You will speak only when instructed." Nico's smile thinned. "With respect, this is an internal employment dispute." Camille Reyes opened her file. Incorrect. This is alleged financial manipulation, witness intimidation, and coercive threats involving custodial leverage over minors. For the first time, Nico's eyes flicked, not to Rose, but to the detectives. Enzo nodded to Vittoria. She projected the sequence onto the wall screen. Altered cash logs, manager overrides, corridor stills, synced timestamps, Dylan's duplicate ticket photos with metadata, and a short, muted clip of Nico pressing Rose toward the cellar entrance. The room's temperature felt to Rose like it dropped 10 degrees. Nico leaned back, forcing a small laugh. Video without audio is theater. She's unstable and exhausted. I was de-escalating. Then we'll add audio, Vittoria said, and tapped. The service corridor feed carried enough from directional mics to catch his words in fragments. Draft statement ready for family services review, where there are no spectators. Nico's jaw locked. Enzo's voice stayed calm, almost quiet. You accused her of theft in a public service area. Repeat your basis now for this record. Nico shifted tactics fast. Discrepancy in Table 15 closeout. Vittoria pulled up the signed receipt and ledger. Table 15 reconciled at 11:03 p.m. by accounting. No discrepancy. He pushed ahead. Cash found in her apron. Placed during contact initiated by you, Vittoria said, freezing the frame where his hand entered the pocket seam from a blind-angle stitch camera he had not known existed. Nico's composure cracked. This is absurd. You're choosing a waitress over management. Enzo took one step forward. His voice was barely contained now, iron under velvet. I am choosing documented fact over your performance. Nico looked directly at Rose then, and the polite mask slipped enough for her to see raw anger. You think he can keep you safe forever? You have debts. You have no standing. Courts won't hand children to someone like you. Rose felt fear rise, then settle into something harder. She stood before anyone could stop her, palms flat on the table, and answered in a clear voice that did not shake. You don't get to use my family as leverage again, ever. Nico sneered. You have no idea how this world works. I do, she said. It worked exactly the way you built it. Quiet threats, clean suits, women who can't afford to fight. She lifted her braced wrist. Now it works on record. Camille slid forward the emergency petition and restraining order forms already stamped for filing. Detectives, you have full packet copies and witness statements. We request immediate no-contact enforcement covering Ms. Diaz and minors Mateo Diaz and Lucia Diaz. One detective nodded. Received. We'll process criminal complaint intake tonight. Nico turned to Enzo with sudden desperation. You don't need police. Let me resign. I'll disappear. Enzo's face did not change. No. He placed his signet ring hand on the table edge, each word deliberate. You are terminated for cause. Your assets tied to internal fraud are frozen pending investigation. You will have no contact, direct or indirect, with Ms. Diaz or her siblings. You are barred from all Bellini properties, affiliates, and contractors. He paused, then finished with lethal clarity. She is under my protection. You will not speak her name again. The guard moved as Nico surged halfway out of his chair, shouting protests now, polish gone. The detective stepped in, cuffed him, read preliminary rights and orders, and guided him toward the private elevator. Nico kept talking until the doors closed, threats collapsing into legal objections no one answered. Silence settled over the office, heavy and clean. Vittoria began collecting signed transfer receipts. Camille handed Rose a copy of the filed no-contact request and pointed to the stamped timestamp. This is active pending judge review at first call. I'll be beside you at the hearing. Rose stared at the paper in her hand. Official seal. Her name spelled correctly. Matteo and Lucia listed as protected parties. For a second, she could not feel her feet. Enzo turned to her, keeping a respectful distance even now. Boundary is in place, he said. It holds. She looked up at him, exhaustion and relief colliding so hard it almost hurt. I heard what you said in there. His eyes stayed on hers. Good. That kind of protection, she said carefully, can become another cage. A muscle moved in his jaw, then stilled. Not if the door is yours. She held his gaze another beat, weighing him, weighing the paperwork, weighing the sleeping children down the hall, and the first legal document in months that had not been weaponized against her. Her voice came out quiet but steady. Then the door stays open. Enzo held her gaze and gave one short nod, as if accepting terms in a contract that mattered more than reputation. Behind him, Vittoria finished labeling evidence bags at the side credenza. The folded roll of bills recovered from Rose's apron seam, Nico's manager phone, his access cards, and a sealed drive containing mirrored camera feeds from the dining room, corridor, tip office, and service entrance. Each bag received a barcode, a signature line, and a transfer time. Camille Reyes watched every entry, then slid copies toward Rose. Nothing leaves chain of custody without two signatures now, she said. You asked for redundancy. This is what that looks like. Rose signed with her left hand again, slower but steadier. A knock sounded at the glass door, and one of the detectives stepped in with rain still darkening his coat shoulders. Update, he said. Dylan Kessler gave a formal statement with counsel present. He confirmed duplicate valet stubs were ordered and rewritten under manager instruction. He turned over original photos and the device. Metadata matches your timeline. He glanced at Rose with professional neutrality that still felt like respect. Unknown calls to your phone came from prepaid lines purchased by a shell vendor linked to Armand's side account. We've frozen the account. You can keep your number. We'll block the traffic. One more pressure point dissolved. Not by hope, by paperwork. 3 days of fear seemed to leave Rose's body in one shaking breath she could not control. She pressed her palm to the table until the tremor eased. The landlord calls, she said. He threatened lockout notices. Camille opened her briefcase at once. We handle that now, while everyone is awake and recorded. Rose almost said she could wait, then remembered how waiting had fed every trap Nico set. She nodded. At 1:36 a.m., seated beside Camille in Enzo's private office with speakerphone active and Vittoria logging the time, Rose returned the latest missed call. Her landlord answered on the second ring, sharp and impatient at first. Miss Diaz, I need commitment by morning or... Camille cut in, voice clipped and formal. This is counsel for Ms. Diaz. No lockout actions will be attempted. You will direct all communication through my office as of this call. There was a pause, then a softer, cautious tone. Camille continued. A housing support guarantee is being transmitted tonight. You will confirm receipt and suspend penalties. Enzo sent one text. 40 seconds later, Vittoria's screen flashed confirmation. The landlord cleared his throat. Received. I'll note the account. Rose listened, stunned by how quickly a threat could shrink when someone with leverage stood beside her instead of above her. When the call ended, she walked to the guest suite where Matteo and Lucia slept under oversized duvets. Two small shapes in borrowed clothes, breaths deep and even. Marta had left a lamp on low and placed their damp alley shoes on a warming mat near the vent. Rose sat on the edge of the nearest bed and watched them for a full minute, counting each inhale until her own breathing matched theirs. Enzo remained at the doorway, keeping respectful distance. "You can stay here as long as needed," he said quietly. "Separate suite, security posted. No staff access without your approval list." Rose looked up. "You keep doing that." "Doing what?" "Turning safety into details." His mouth moved by a fraction. Details are how safety holds. By 7:12 a.m., rain had thinned to mist over downtown, and the emergency family court chambers smelled like wet wool and old paper. Rose sat at counsel table in a clean blouse Marta found in a sealed garment bag, her wrist brace hidden under the cuff, Camille on her right, and Vittoria 2 seats behind, with a banker's box of exhibits. Matteo and Lucia waited in a private room with a court-appointed advocate and coloring books, not in the hearing itself. Nico appeared by secure video from holding, jaw tight, lawyer composed. The judge, a tired woman with silver glasses and a precise voice, reviewed the filings in silence that felt heavier than shouting. Camille rose first, laying out the coercion timeline with timestamps, camera stills, medical photos, financial records, and the recorded threat fragments from the service corridor. She entered Dylan's statement, Dr. Conti's exam notes, and the incident log showing no contact service already in effect. Nico's attorney attempted to frame it as employment conflict. The judge stopped him twice to ask why a floor manager possessed custody-related documents unrelated to payroll, and why prepaid contact lines had targeted Ms. Diaz after disputed shifts. He had no clean answer. When Rose testified, she kept her voice low and exact. She did not embellish. She did not apologize. At 8:04 a.m., the judge granted temporary legal guardianship to Rose pending full hearing, affirmed the no-contact order covering both children and all Bellini properties, and referred financial coercion findings to criminal court intake. The clerk stamped the order. The sound of the stamp hitting paper felt like a door closing where it should have closed months ago. Outside the courtroom, Matteo reached her first, searching her face for the verdict before asking. Rose knelt despite the ache in her knees and placed the stamped order in his hands. "You and Lucia come home with me," she said. "No one separates us." Matteo read the first line slowly, lips moving over legal words, then looked up with fierce relief he tried to hide. Lucia threw her arms around Rose's neck and did not let go until Camille gently reminded them they still had one stop left for signatures. That stop was Il Vetro, just after opening prep, where polished glass met the sour memory of the night before. Enzo had called a mandatory staff meeting in the private dining room. No guests, no music, no dimmed lights to soften what had happened. Lena stood near the back, hands clasped, eyes rimmed red from lack of sleep. Dylan stood beside a union representative, pale but upright. Several servers avoided Rose's gaze. One hostess met it and quietly said, "I'm sorry I looked away." Rose believed she meant it. The woman in emerald silk and the men who had watched in silence were not there and never came forward. Their absence was noted in the report and nowhere else. Enzo addressed the room without theatrics. "Mr. Armand is terminated for cause and under criminal investigation. Effective now. No employee handles cash counts alone. All disciplinary interactions require dual management presence and camera visibility. And minors are never used as leverage in any personnel process. Violations result in immediate suspension." He paused, eyes sweeping the staff. "Protocol exists to prevent abuse of power. If it cannot do that, it is failure." Then he turned to Rose. "Ms. Diaz, your position as private event logistics manager is active upon your signature. Housing support and guardianship scheduling accommodations are attached by contract, independent of personal association. Counsel reviewed." He set the folder on the table and stepped back. Rose opened it while Camille stood beside her. Every clause matched what she had demanded in the night. Third-party oversight, no private summons after hours, compensation in clear numbers, housing funds routed through legal trust, childcare schedule protections. She signed, not because she owed anyone gratitude, but because the framework was solid and her siblings needed stability that did not depend on luck. By late afternoon, back at the penthouse kitchen, Lucia colored at the island while Mateo argued with a math worksheet and pretended he was not enjoying the argument. Marta set out grilled cheese triangles and apple slices. Dr. Conti rechecked Rose's wrist and cleared her for light duty with weekly follow-up. Vittoria delivered a final packet. Confirmation that physical evidence had been logged into detective custody. Payroll fraud files copied to financial crimes intake. Dylan enrolled in witness protection protocol for employment retaliation. And Rose's old apartment lease converted to voluntary termination without penalty once new housing keys were issued. Every thread that had dangled in fear now sat in writing. When evening settled and the windows reflected kitchen light instead of storm, Enzo found Rose on the terrace threshold, coat around her shoulders, city noise softened below. He stayed beside the door, not crowding her space. "The guest apartment across the courtyard is ready when you want privacy from this floor," he said. "Separate entrance. Your name on the lease, not mine." Rose looked at him for a long moment, measuring the offer and the man making it. "You said I choose," she replied. "I choose the courtyard apartment. I choose this job. I choose to keep my own counsel in every decision that touches my family." "Good," he said. "Keep choosing." She hesitated, then extended her uninjured hand, palm up, an invitation with conditions. "You can hold my hand," she said, voice steady. "That's all tonight." Enzo stepped closer, asked with his eyes before he moved, and when she nodded, he took her hand gently, as if handling something earned and breakable. Inside, Lucia laughed at something Mateo muttered over fractions. The sound traveled through the open door, ordinary and bright. Rose stood there with cold air on her face, legal orders in her bag, and her siblings safe within reach, aware that healing would be work measured in choices, boundaries, and mornings that tested whether promises held. For the first time in a long time, she had proof that they could.